Getting back on here to the show on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, we're going to talk more about the Stefon Diggs trade because it really shook up the whole landscape of the NFL. I talked more about it yesterday on how it affects the Texans and how really they're up there, in my opinion, now with the Kansas City Chiefs and seeing them in terms of talent and in terms of just star quarterback, the coaching. It looks a lot more comparable than all the other teams do to them at this point. So it's just catapulted the Texans up to a whole another dimension. If they're ready for that, we're going to have to see it all play out. The Chiefs have the experience on their side, but it's looking great right now for the Texans. And I didn't really talk too much about the Buffalo Bills, how it all affects them, why they decided it was a good chance to trade Stefon Diggs. We're going to start with the financial side of things. By trading Diggs right now in this year, the Bills still have to take up the entirety of his remaining signing bonus this year. That's $31 million in dead cap money, the highest for any wide receiver contract currently right now. So they have to still see that out. And on top of that, you also had the rumors and just constant talk about Stefon Diggs not being settled in with the Bills, kind of losing confidence in the direction that they were going. And there was always just seems to be some sort of friction there. You saw the outbursts on the sideline with Josh Allen or by himself. It always just seemed to be something there that was just really ruffling the feathers to everything going on. Last season, around this point, mandatory minicamp was going on for the Bills, and Sean McDermott excused Stefon Diggs. He decided to do that for reasons that he might have. People speculate and they assumed there was some friction there. It all seemed to kind of settle itself over the course of the season, but again, it all rose up again in the offseason. There were trade talks earlier this year, and now it all finally comes into fruition. And you're looking at this Buffalo team now and how it all works out. I mentioned the financial side of things and how it all worked out and how that was a reason, an incentive to trade him. The Bills, from the reports I've read on The Athletic from Diana Rossini and among others, the Bills thought that this could be the last solid chance that they have at dealing Stefon Diggs with a decent return. Diggs is now 30 years old. He's only going to get, obviously he's going to get older, but his production is going to start to decline even more. We've seen it decline a little bit over the last year and a half with the Buffalo Bills, in part because I think they've realized that they kind of have to change their strategy a little bit going forward, and he'll be completely off of their books in 2025, and they're going to have that additional second round pick that they just got in this trade instead of waiting around, not wanting to trade him because he is still Stefon Diggs. He has that relationship with Josh Allen. If they kept him around for one more year, not only would he have been older, say he plays really bad, hopefully he doesn't get another injury, but if that were to happen also, they have to take his cap hit again, and his trade value, any value you can get for him, decreases significantly next year, if anybody even wants him next year for the asking price that the Bills might want. Then, if they would have released also Von Miller, there also talks about him and how he's also getting to that stage with Stefon Diggs, getting a little bit older, not really producing like he did in his first year. It is the possibility that they could release him. And with just releasing or trading Stefon Diggs next year, they would have over $22 million in dead money next year if they traded him or released him next year. And then they'd have to wait another year in 2026 to then get him off their books. They saw the opportunity to do it a bit earlier now, as well as with the Von Miller thing that I mentioned, also getting to that same range with Stefon Diggs. And if they were to move on from Von Miller next year by getting them both off of their books next year, the team would have almost saved about $36 million in 2025 in that cap space that they will have. They were already projected to be under the cap, plus all of that extra money that they're going to have. The biggest goal that I read or have been reading in the news and the sources that have come out with this is that the Bills wanted to go into 2025 with a lot cleaner looking salary cap situation than they had this year. Call it whatever you want this year, a rebuild, a reshape. I'm going to call it a realignment year. I haven't heard that one yet, so that's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it more of a realignment year, getting your ducks in order. They had to sacrifice definitely this year for salary cap reasons. Jordan Poyer's gone, Tre'Davious White's gone, now Stefon Diggs is gone, Gabe Davis is gone. The kind of contract that he wanted, the Bills weren't going to be able to afford that. So it's not a reshape or a rebuild because you still have Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So in reality, you still have that chance. And if they would have kept Stefon Diggs anyway, they still would have needed a wide receiver. I don't think having Stefon Diggs satisfies them in any way that their offense is just going to turn it on again with him just another year removed, older now. They were still going to need a wide receiver anyway. And instead of waiting a year and then trying to get him off the books the following year, they saw an opportunity to do it earlier to try and realign everything for 2025 and still have Josh Allen a year younger and trying to have more time to figure out this wide receiver situation. Also, the draft class being a lot deeper this year adds on to the incentive to potentially find another number one wide receiver in the latter half of the first round. So really, there's a lot of pretty good points that you can make for trading Stefon Diggs. The biggest thing, seeing the trade go down, you're thinking, oh my God, how could they get rid of Stefon Diggs? What are they going to do? They don't have anybody on their roster. I mentioned who they have right now. It doesn't compare to the level of talent other teams have, but the Bills are just thinking more long-term now with this pick. They're going to have a chance with Josh Allen anyway. So I think looking at it now, looking more into it, it does make sense to some point. Stefon Diggs, now talking about him a little bit more. I mentioned he was 30, and I don't want to say that, it's done for him. He's just going to become average now. Last year, after November, the Diggs targets and average yards per game dropped, but that's when you saw the shift in identity that I pointed out to just a few seconds ago. They made that change from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady. Before that, Stefon Diggs was having a pretty decent season, was putting up some pretty impressive numbers, and at one point, I forgot what it was, but he had a consecutive game streak of putting up over 100 yards. I think it was 5 games. Yeah, 5 games of 100 yards prior to the coaching change. So then you see that coaching change, and they start running the ball more with James Cook playing off at the tight ends, a lot more play action. Josh isn't putting it in harm's way a lot more than he has before. So that all plays into it, and I think then, unfortunately for Stefon Diggs, he did suffer because of that. He could have gotten more unsettled because of that. I don't want to say that his targets went down and he wasn't involved, so he's just going to throw, have a bad attitude about it. We don't know that for sure, but it is a fact that his production dropped after that. Whether it correlates, you can't really make that decision or estimation right now, but it is where it is right now. They could be shifting into that new identity, so this, again, just adds another reason why they could feel very well about moving on from Stefon Diggs if he just doesn't fit that mold for them. Brandon Beane, one of the guys that everybody wants to talk about, spoke about it yesterday in his response to the trade. He said that these moves are never easy, very hard, not made overnight. Anytime you make a move like this, as I said, very difficult. You're doing it. You're trying to win. Sometimes people might not see that. This by no means the Bills are giving up or trying to take a step back or anything like that. Stefon Diggs was about to begin his 4-year, $70 million deal. Before, to add on to that financial side of things, the trade right away saves them $27 million in 2025. So that's the biggest thing with that, and how Josh Allen reacted to all of this. Brandon Beane said that he mentioned he did talk to Josh Allen prior to both having regular conversations anyway. They haven't spoken since the trade went down at the time that I wrote down all the notes for this. But he emphasized he didn't want to blindside Josh Allen with anything. In his words, he said, I did alert him. There had been some inquiries about it, and it wasn't 100% off of the table to trade Stefon Diggs. That was mentioned to Josh, so I think that's good for a general manager to do that. But then, looking deeper into it now, reading more about this situation, sources close to the situation around this whole trade said that the Texans presented the Bills with an offer on Tuesday, which started a 24-hour or a little bit more and some change period of internal discussions. It even involved ownership and bringing them in and what they thought all about it. Ultimately, like everybody knows, the Bills agreed to it on Wednesday morning, and that's when Brandon Beane called Stefon Diggs to tell him about the trade. That's kind of how it all went down with them. And I mentioned the financial side of things and why there are some very solid, legitimate points as to why this made sense. But now you look at the Bills, big picture, they have the 28th pick now. Very likely candidate to trade up. You acknowledge that. But again, it's a deep class. So do you want to do that? Do you just feel comfortable with accepting that if you go in the second round and get a wide receiver, he might not be the starter that you need and you just have to go with that? That's an option. Brandon Beane mentioned free agency is not over. There are solid players they could add. Tyler Boyd jumps to mind right away. Odell, whatever he has left in the tank that he can give you is an option. But regardless of that, it was always going to be hard to keep Stefon Diggs because of all the noise and the constant questions and topics being brought up to Beane, Josh Allen, and Stefon Diggs. I think now it got to the point where this was a good compensation for the Bills, that they just felt it was the time to move on from him. Not that they wanted to move on from him, but looking at it big picture, money and everything like that, it made the most sense for them. I'm sure Stefon Diggs understood that. He had a very heartfelt message to the organization right after it all went down. And if it all goes bad, say it all comes really bad and they have a very poor record and Josh doesn't look as he usually does that throw into the conversation of a Sean McDermott or somebody being let go because of how bad it looks? Is that fair if it goes that way, knowing that it is a reset, realignment year, like I mentioned before? That's a question I'm sure that will be posed at some point in the season if it all does go really extremely bad. But I don't think it will solidify into anything very serious. Sean McDermott has proven himself, I think, with that organization enough for them to know that nobody's in a great position this year, so everyone's jobs are pretty much on the safer side. But the biggest question and thing to talk about with this whole situation, and I'll close with this, is that, we saw Patrick Mahomes lose Tyreek Hill. At some point, Aaron Rodgers lost Davante Adams. Now, Josh Allen loses Stefon Diggs. Lamar Jackson's really never had a wide receiver to the caliber of a Tyreek Hill or a Davante Adams. Justin Herbert just lost all of his targets and how people talk about him. This is a situation now with Josh Allen that people will state it, he doesn't have Stefon Diggs. That could be a reason for the drop-off, but I don't think a lot of people will feel sorry for him or will really use that as an excuse for much longer or for very long, because comparing him to Patrick Mahomes all this time, seeing him as a top 3, top 2 quarterback, and putting him in that conversation, Patrick Mahomes has been in this situation and he's gone on and won 2 Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill. So Josh Allen has been in this conversation. This is the situation you want to be in, obviously, being compared to the best and being in those conversations. But at some point now, he has an opportunity. It doesn't look great, but it is an opportunity to go out and show people that with this lack of talent, I am still that guy, and I can still go out there and take this organization to new heights and produce, even if I don't have the pieces around me like the other great quarterbacks have gone and done. And if he doesn't do that, people already don't give him enough credit to my estimation. So if he does do that, I'm sure people will jump on him. It's not going to be fair to some people, it will be to others, but that's the kind of situation you get when you're talked about in the conversations with Patrick Mahomes being compared to all the greats, and really just proving and showing out there on the field that you can win games on your own. This is the biggest chance he has of proving it, and I'm going to be very excited and anticipating to see how it all plays out, who they get to kind of help him out a little bit, because the Bills just can't sit around and do nothing. So seeing how they address that, seeing how Josh Allen reacts to it and how he plays off of it, it's all going to be great to watch. More, just to add more to the NFL season, more storylines, more anticipation. It's all going to be great. It's all going to be a huge part of the NFL draft, which is just 3 weeks away from today. So more on that will come over the next few weeks on this show. But on that, I will close out this segment, and that's all the time I will have on this show. Again, I want to say a big thank you to you guys for tuning in, and reminding you guys to please like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to also follow the network on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more content outside of the sports world as well. If you want to see more of me and the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, check out the YouTube channels, the GSMC Sports Network channel, and the Podcast Network channel for YouTube shorts that are posted on there daily, full live recorded videos, entire shows that are on there if you want to rewatch an entire show, as well as individual segment videos on each of the segments that make up the live show. If you missed one or want to go back and watch a specific one, they're all on there on both of those channels as well. Tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more of the episodes and more discussions and topics around the NFL with me, your host, Manny Maradiegue. Thanking you guys for joining me today, and hoping you guys will join me all tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to